heard you made a good movie out of that one.
All right. The Bridging Podcast, episode 5. We've got Uncle Vic in the building. Woo, 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 woo.
Yes, good day, good day, good day, good day.
How are you, Uncle Vic? How are you today?
I'm good now as the day comes to an end.
Okay.
It's one of those Mondays when you start off with the acceleration you weren't anticipating when you got out of bed.
Yeah, hey, roller coaster ride.
But it's ending and we've survived it, so we're good.
Yeah, that's what's important, right?
That's what matters.
The fact that we can get through it, no matter what comes our way.
Absolutely.
It's all a matter of mindset.
Absolutely.
If you're going to be defeated, then you're going to be defeated.
Oh, this is true. This is true.
Before we started the recording, you were asking us what are we speaking about today. And this conversation that we're having now came about a discussion that we had on a previous podcast. The topic of that podcast is the state of women in South Africa. So I think this podcast today focuses more on the states of men, because at one point in that podcast, one of the guests that we had on, Candace Chirwa, she studies a lot about, she's actually a menstrual activist. So she studied a lot about the social dynamics in South Africa, the relationship between men and female in South Africa. That's kind of what she focused on in Basti. So one of the questions that she asked me was, what does it mean to you to be a man? And I'm not going to lie, I fumbled on that question because I didn't know what the answer was. I didn't think about it to the point where I could just answer it straight off the bat, you know? So then I thought about it a bit and I was like, how come I don't know this answer? I feel like one of the reasons why is because we focus in conversations like the state of women in South Africa and not the state of men in South Africa. And that's why from that conversation, we pointed out the fact that I didn't know, I couldn't answer that question. And how do we get to the point where we can answer that question? We need to discuss it, not just between Thulie and myself, but also between the other generations of men.
Yep.
So going into that whole topic, do you feel like what it means to be a man today is different to what it meant to be a man when you were younger, when you were our age?
To preface that, I just a quote came to mind, which goes along the lines of, if you don't stand for anything, you fall for everything.
Yep.
So in what you just said now, Josh, I think the answer to that question of what does it mean to be a man isn't like an answer that I guess answers it directly, as in the answer that you'd expect. But the reason why we don't know is I think there's a loss of identity, which is, I could almost say, directly related from what I've observed to what you were saying with most boys growing up without fathers.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I just wanted to add that, and then I think you can ask your question again.
So it's interesting because when we look at being a man, when I was growing up, or if you take it even slightly few years before that, because there's baby boomer generation and I'm just after that. But if you take it to that, there were certain things around what made a man that may need to be reconsidered, right? So men's validation was all the things that women are fighting against right now, right? It was us being the hierarchical and decision-making and the earners and the feeders and which in fair enough, it's something that the function of a man is. But I think what we didn't understand was that even though that is a responsibility of a man, it does not diminish the ability of a woman to also participate and support that. And that means both in the functions that they take, whether they decide to go and work and whether they decide to become pilots or astronauts. Somehow in our mentality, that usurped our manhood. And therefore we've spent decades in trying to subjugate women in terms of what they could believe they could become or what it is that they could actually do. But if I can separate that for a moment and just come back to the question that you're asking at hand, which is, and I think it's a valid question because there are some external key factors that have played a critical role in as we've discussed earlier, in terms of, as you've mentioned, this element of identity and the ability to interact that identity with, for example, a father. But I think there's another thing that's at play here, which is one of the reasons why, as men today, there needs to be a concerted intentionality and effort in the manner in which you start, for want of a better expression, breeding yourself. Because what's happened is, in my belief, is that sense of identity has also come from an internal inability to actually start questioning yourself and saying, but who am I? And what am I geared up for? And what am I why am I here? And the sense of self and understanding self is a number one component of, in my belief, of leadership. So you can't lead others if you can't lead yourself.
Yeah.
If you can't truly identify with who you are as a person. And therefore, to your point, you're absolutely right. If you can't stand for something, then you fall for everything, right? So you need, as an individual, barring all external factors in terms of your environment and the things that have affected you in terms of, or may have affected you in terms of your upbringing, you as a man need to start asking yourself these fundamental questions of who am I and what do I stand for? What are my beliefs? What is my identity? What is the direction I'm going? How am I going to get there? What factors are going to play a role in me being able to get there? How do I see the world? How do I see myself? Because those are the kind of interplays that start deciding your relationships. They start deciding your careers. They start deciding the choices that you make. And therefore, if you don't have these grounded and cemented as you start developing over time in you, then your environment and your circumstance and your situation will be the thing that starts defining you. If you take our political situation at the moment, right? Most of the people that you're hearing about who are corrupt are not unintelligent people. As a matter of fact, they're quite qualified.
I feel like they're smart.
They are smart. As a matter of fact,
can get away with that.
They're in positions of influence. They're in positions of power. They're in positions of decision making, right? If you look at their credentials, they probably will spit out CVs with a lot of experience. But what is the essence of the choices that you're making at defining moments in your life? What are they based on? Because if they're based on the validation of how the world sees me, then yes, that house on the hill and that car that you drive is going to be the lure that defines whether or not you make a decision, yes or no, and how you make that decision, right? Not saying you can't have a house or a car, but I'm just saying if it becomes your defining factor, then the kind of things that you're going to actually do to try and acquire it may go beyond the bounds of what it is that you should be thinking about from a character and a principle point of view. So those elements of who you are a starting point and exclude and almost detract away from what my circumstances and my situations, and they can be good explanations as to the fact that you have to rev your engine a little harder than the other person who had a father, etc., etc. You may have to read a few more books, study a bit more deeper, hang out with a few more uncles, as opposed to the one who grew up with a present and involved father. But it doesn't preclude you from being able to do that. And if you don't move into the trajectory of starting to think about those things, then even in your 50s or 60s, let PPE tender come along.
That's true. I think a lot of what you're saying is true. Even from an objective point of view, I think just by mere observation, we can agree that that is true. My question is, in our pursuit of trying to find out why we are the way that we are, because I'll preface this by explaining. So with me, the way I tend to look at things is I want to know why something is at its very root. You know what I'm saying? So the way men operate, the way women operate in society, I always look, I try to have an objective, point of view, standing back and looking at it all. And I asked myself, why do people behave the way that they do? And the answer that I always come to, I stand to be corrected, is it all stems from, primal instincts, despite the fact that maybe they have changed, like, now women aren't necessarily looking for the man that's physically brooding and, has those physical attributes, although that still does play, some parts on both sides, as to, the decision that you make on who you choose as a partner. But in today's day and age, how that would be translated is, that big brooding man who is going to be good at hunting has now become the person who has the biggest wallet, for example. And it's not even a sense that, women are, gold diggers. I think it's more that if a guy has all of these things, it's a kind of physical representation of that mentality of, okay, this person, when he wants something, he does what he has to do to go and get it. And in today's context, that's what equals survival. You know what I'm saying? So,
are you saying that men are incentivized to be like that? To find a mate in the evolutionary story of things?
I mean, obviously there are those, people that are few and I would say far between that, don't look for, those specific traits. Like some of them, they want, I don't even think it's some of them. I think everyone at the end of the day is looking for those traits that are almost 100% found in successful people, and the person doesn't have to be successful yet. So to say that it's kind of an incentive, and that as a guy you have to push to make a lot of money or whatever the case is, I don't think that's necessarily the case, because now in our day and age, we've become such I don't want to say intelligent, more complex beings, that we've decided to branch off into other walks of life where we just want to acquire knowledge, and that's it. And not because we want money or anything. Some people just want to be like a yogi in the middle of the forest, for example. You know what I'm saying?
No, true.
So true. I think that just stems from us being complex beings and being able to make that decision. But I always have that tendency to compare us to I guess to animals. And
yeah, so I want to extend a little bit more on what you said, right? Because if what you're saying is correct, where it's like an instinct thing, right? That instinct should have been throughout the existence of humanity, right? So that leads me to this question, right? 30 years ago, when you were our age, were there problems like gender-based violence? Were there the same problems that we have today? Were they worse? Have they gotten better? Have they gotten worse?
I want you to hold that question. I'll come back to that question. It's an important question. And I just really, with Thulie, I wanna just touch on a couple of things. Look, I am no human behavioralist in any way or form. And there's a couple of things that I think are key in the points that you've made that I think I'm a little bit familiar with from the context of knowledge than really experience or study. So the I think it's been attributed that the number one key need for man is honor.
Okay.
So men seek honor. And the number one key need for a woman is security. Now, the assumption about security is that it's financially related. Mm-hmm. There's an element of that, but it's not entirely true. Security, in my understanding, is a sense of appreciation, respect, the idea that the person that I love or I'm with or I'm committing to is somebody who is focused on me or has an attention on me, and in their entirety they are trying to ensure that we are able to travel and traverse this journey of life with as minimal amount of hardship and pain and difficulty. That's not a financial thing. That's an emotional thing. That's me having a sense of believing that things like trust and things like belief in somebody is being reciprocated and is being validated and is being is being, acknowledged. Yes, you can go as deep as you like in terms of the primal human being. But one of the things which separates us from primal animals is the fact that we've got this, call it fortunate or unfortunate thing called choice. All other animals live on instinct. Otherwise, the lion would have built a fridge a long time ago and wouldn't be hunting all the time, right? It would hunt once and then store its stuff in the deep freeze and come back for it later. So as it feels at that moment, it responds. That's not how we are. We have the power of choice and to choose and to make decisions. And that power of choice and choosing and making decisions is what's given rise to this creativity in the world that we have, because through that we're able to then diagnose and assess and as a consequence of that build that, the things that we need. And it'll come to your question really about things bad 30 years later than they were, 30 years earlier. So unfortunately, my argument is that as deep as you go to dig to find why people behave the way they behave, you'll always rise to the surface of choice. Because I can take somebody who has had the most difficult life and wonder why that their first reaction to a need was not to go out and take it from somebody else. Whereas somebody else who may have come from the same environment has exactly the opposite response, where for them to jump over your fence or to help themselves to your car, whatever the case may be their reaction. So this thing of choice is essential. And because of choice, one of the deepest things that men have to do is to ask themselves, what are they going to choose? What are the fundamental, and by the way, that's both for men and women.
Yes.
But in the case of this conversation, men have to ask themselves the question, what are we going to choose? And when you start making that question about what you're going to choose, you're going to be able to answer your question about what makes a man, because it's going to be based on what your choices are. So if your choices are to say that, I believe in, I have let's just use a real example. I have a wife.
Okay.
My belief of my wife is that she has unalienable rights like I do. That's a choice that I've made, which means she can aspire to be whatever it is that she wants to be. That's a choice I've made. My choice is that I have a home and a wife who I want to dedicate my life to. That's not a feeling, that's a decision. We're actually having a conversation tomorrow about, fidelity and infidelity in relationships and marriages. And one of the greatest quotes I ever heard from Oprah Winfrey that, fidelity is not a feeling, it's a decision. It's one that you make. I have made the choice that the sparkle in her eye, I can't extinguish. So I have made the choice that every day I must be consistently trying to ignite that spark, and I must be cautious of the fact of not doing that. I have a choice, I have a daughter. And as a man, and I have, is the kind of life that I think my daughter should live in a world of, man and woman in terms of the gender discussion. I have 3 boys who I have a philosophy and a principle in terms of inculcating into them that my role as a father is X. Right? That's how I see my functionality. I see my role as a husband as X. I see my role as have I always had this? No.
What happened to the point where you did? What did you go through to learn that was necessary? Because in my mind, if you apply that same situation to men of today, they should learn the same thing, right? Or do you feel like you had a unique experience that a lot of men don't have, which is why they don't think the way that you do?
No, I don't. I didn't have a unique experience, so I didn't rise out of the ashes with this. If you go back into my life, you're gonna fight. You're gonna see a lot of blood on the dance floor, right? So, but one of the critical things as human beings is that we have to be progressing and learning. We have to be consistently evolving. I think you used the word, and in order to be able to do that, you have to do one critical thing that all people need to do, and all people who want to lead, whether it's yourself or others, you have to take stock of yourself. You have to spend time with yourself and take true, unequivocal stock of who you are. You know, when my first marriage didn't work out and I was going into my second marriage, I asked myself a fundamental question: would Vic marry Vic? Wow. And you know what my answer was? Hell no. I know you. I know exactly who you are. So no. So then I had to figure out, okay, why wouldn't I even marry me? And that's when I had to start evolving. That's when I had to start changing. That's when I had to take some deep introspective views about who I was, my behavior, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the kind of thing that men have to do, because in order for you to get to the point of truly understanding who you are and being able to answer the question as what defines you as a man, you need to have that conversation with you. And whether you need a book to write it down, or whether you need a dictaphone, or whether you just need to spend 15, 20 minutes. And by the way, this is not a live, this is not, oh, now I need to go into the forests of Tibet or whatever the case. No.
Ayahuasca.
This is a 10, 15, 20-minute exercise with yourself daily. And that behavior is going to create a habit.
Okay. In my mind, you need to hit some sort of rock bottom to think that way. Like,
you need to have look, there are easy ways and hard ways in life, right? If you do that, you guys haven't hit rock bottom. If you do that now, you'd be great, right? Okay, if you want to go out there and something happens to you and then you go, okay, now I'm going to do it, fine. But not necessarily. People don't have to result in success out of misery. You just need to progress.
How did you learn that though? That's what I'm trying to get to is, did you hit a rock bottom? Because in my mind, there's two ways to learn. You either learn the hard way or someone teaches you. So I just want to find out from you, because like, I think this podcast is a good opportunity for people to learn, right? So they don't have to hit a rock bottom. But in your personal experience, did you hit a rock bottom, or did someone teach you? How did you get to thinking that way? Because if we can figure out how you got to think that way, maybe we can figure out how to get other people to think that way.
I hear you. I wish life was as simple as a photocopy, or just take and it'll be the same. So you don't go through a once-off rock bottom. You go through a trajectory of different experiences. And those different experiences should start changing you. Now, if you ask me, where's my rock bottom? I failed my matric badly. Was that the rock bottom? I have no idea, right? So it could have been that. I'm an adopted child. I was adopted at the age of 6 or 7. Was that the rock bottom? I don't know. But what I can tell you in all the different experiences that I've had in life is one of the key things that I made a choice of, and this is a fundamental choice, is I wanted to learn from those experiences. Now, some of the experiences took a lot longer for the penny to drop. Others were really, really quick. But one of the things I encourage people to do, which if you were to ask, what's the thing that's actually, because now we're going to go into some real cosmic stuff, right? But I'll put this in a nutshell. If you were to ask, what are the things that have enabled you in your journey to be able to come up with some of these thinkings? The key one I would talk about is living with intentionality. If there's one thing that I can tell you, that from a very young age, I've lived with intentionality. And what does that mean? It means I've shown up. So regardless of the difficulties or the challenges, I've just shown up. And I can take that back to the age of 6, to the time and the moment and the day I remember coming into a new family. So I think that has helped in a lot of ways. When I failed my A levels, my final year school exams, I made an unequivocal decision I would never fail again. And when I made that decision, what it meant was that the whole world got blocked out for a year. And I put my knuckles into it, in terms of making sure that I really beat this exam thing to where I needed. When I was going to university, it was a highly intentional decision. Did I know what I was going to study in university? Hell no, I played around like nobody's business. But I intended to actually be in university. I intended to actually succeed with an honors and a master's. Did I use what I used to come out of that? No. I mean, I don't know what it is that I even studied. But there's certain things where I pitched up with intentionality. and decision making. There's some things that I cocked up royally, absolutely, but that would probably be the thing that is significant for me.
I'm not satisfied.
Can we agree that then the definition of failure is giving up, not necessarily
100%.
failing at a specific task? Because a lot of people take failure as the the cosmic language of don't do this, type of thing, versus get back up and try again.
You should put that as a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Because that it is exactly that. Because actually it is in what is considered not success where your success arises. I needed to fail my exams because I would be a completely different human being. I needed to, if I look at the trajectory of life and that's why I said you can get really cosmic about this. But if I looked at the trajectory of life, it was actually leaving where I was to go and because when I had to repeat, I had to leave where I was to go somewhere else to go and repeat. And that somewhere else was an isolated place in another country, which I knew very few to nobody, which meant that I focused, which meant that I passed, which meant that I got into university. So it's the intentionality is instinctual because there's certain things within you that are talking to you that say, do this, right? But the intentionality is also physical because you've actually got to go and do it. And every one of us are born with those, when you're just about to do something, brain goes, this is not a good idea.
My thing is, if you look at the men of today, a lot of us seem to be missing that instinctual thing that you're talking about. So my thing is, I'm trying to get to the bottom of where that came up in you. Like, where did your instinct come from? Because you can nail it down to one of the things you mentioned was when you arrived at a new family that you didn't know when you were 6 years old. That's like a huge thing to deal with. That's a huge challenge to overcome. A lot of people are faced with similar challenges in their life, but you chose to show up in that situation. A lot of people don't.
But remember, the showing up at 6 is a seed. It's even the microscopic elements of a seed. So we're all doing it. We're all making choices. Every single moment of the day, we're making decisions. And we're making decisions rightly or wrongly. They just the problem that happens, and to your point as to why some men not doing it, because the habit of making the wrong decision. Let's do something as simple as this. The only difference between Vic, who wrote A-levels a year before the Vic who wrote A-levels again, was not that I had a new brain. I just changed my behavior. The Vic before, first Vic, if squash was happening around the corner, if there was a party going on down the road, if there was my girlfriend calling me to go to her place, Vic went. That's what Vic was doing. Vic here said, I'm not failing, so therefore the world is blocked out. Vic literally went from school back home, school back home. That was it. That's all Vic did. So all I'm saying is that all these little things are seeds, but then they become behavioral things. So the first time Vic, let's use grade 12, day one of grade 12, the first thing that he did, which was off tangent to what he should have been doing, became a major habit by the time it was 6 months down the line. By the time it was 9 months down the line, it was irreversible chemical reaction because he was just heading for a brick wall for the exams. If Vic had done the same thing that he did a year later, earlier, trajectory would have been different.
Okay.
To me, that sounds like self-love.
It is absolutely self-love. It is everything to do with self-love. And where do you get self-love from? Spending time with self. It's about saying,
Building
okay,
that relationship with yourself.
what do you want, Vic? Do you want to fail or do you want to pass? Vic, just me and you, guys are gone, no girlfriend, you're in a whole new place. Do you want to fail or do you want to pass? There's the university. Take a look at it. And actually, you can even have this conversation out loud with yourself. Do you want to be in there or don't you want to be in there? So to be in there, do you know what it's going to take? Yeah. Okay. Then guess what? Go do it. So if you're in an environment of, and I'll just come to a point around something quite important. If you're in an environment about us buddies, and every Thursday we meet for drinks, every Saturday we go for golf. There's nothing wrong with golf, but if you create that kind of momentum, that kind of habit, that kind of behavior, then that, to your earlier point, means that's the thing that's going to influence you and decide you. And, you know, somebody calls and says, let's go do this for 6 hours instead of staying at home. Guess what? Let's go do this for 6 hours.
Do you think what's missing in men of today is self-love?
Yeah.
How do you build that self-love when you're a man who grew up in a household where you got beaten on by your father, your parents said that you're nothing, you went to school, you got treated the same way, you just truly believe to yourself that you are not worth anything?
I think
How do you get out of that?
for me, I think it was a quote by Nelson Mandela that he made, which went along the lines of, I might not be quoting it directly, but he said that everybody is born knowing how to love, but we're taught how to hate, you know? So I don't think it's a sense of learning how to love. Maybe it's a thing of learning how to love yourself again, but through...
Stick with that. Stick with that. You're there.
All right,
You're
track.
there. You're right there.
See what I'm doing here?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, I don't think it's a thing of that. It's because through life we go through all of these different instances where we kind of learn how to hate ourselves more and more, and hate, like, that attribute of hatred is kind of imposed on us by ourselves, by our external environment, you know, this and this and that. And to get to that point where, as a man, you can, you know, love yourself, self-love, I feel like, it's important to go through stuff, you know, because I think it goes back to what you were saying about making choices. You know, it's important to go through stuff that's on the negative side of life. Like, you have to experience things, you know, learn those life lessons. But you have to learn, because through that learning phase, I think you can like, the word learning is interchangeable with self-love, if I can say that, because, you know, you learn from those things, and in the act of you learning, you are bettering yourself in the process. Because some people, they can go through life and choose not to learn. They can choose to stay down when they get knocked down on the ground. You know what I'm saying? And you're not learning. Instead, you're just having all of these things happen to you, and you get worse and worse and worse as a point, to the point where, you know, like, for example, you were saying that you were raised, you know, by a single parent, at some point, and there's another person in life who was also raised by a single parent, but they're in prison now. You know, you're not. You're well off. So it's that choice that you make to learn, because through learning, you will then acquire or reacquire that self-love that was once lost. Because, yeah,
You said something that was so powerful, you glossed over it, but it is the quintessential
bring me back.
Spiritual experience you have to go through to answer your question. You said that you're going to have to need to learn to love yourself again. And you said that from the premise that we are actually love. As human beings, we're created to be love. My philosophy is that my God, who created me, sperm, ovary, and this is what I am, created me in the same way as I am predestined. When a sperm, microscopic sperm meets a microscopic ovary, I'm predestined to start this fetus process of a heart, a brain, eyes, legs, hands, blood, the whole amazing story of two little things that come together that create an entire human being. Right? In that creation that's already preordained in those two meeting, I have a preordained existence that is irrespective to what my environment has given me, whether I've come out with a silver spoon or no silver spoon, etc. But in order for me to understand what that preordainedness of me is, I need to learn to love me. And by loving me, I love that which has been that's been there, the power, the universal forces that has created me. That's what I get to love. And the moment, I don't even have to hit the sweet spot. As a matter of fact, it can be far from that moment. It's just the thought process of getting in there. But the moment I perfect, and I use the word perfect loosely, but the moment I start perfecting that ability to self-love, that ability to see myself completely differently, then that's the process that actually starts driving me to my destiny and to my goal. Because then I start precluding everything. You can't say anything that has, oh yeah, I'll get affected by it, but tomorrow I'll brush it off and off I go. If you look at top, let's use an example, athletes, that level of confidence in themselves, in their abilities, in what they're able to do, is a heightened level of self, is a level of self that, one of the greatest athletes, I think, maybe they rivaled with Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, just had a sense of who he was to the extent that the entire NBA didn't have. Every player that was training as much as they were training, et cetera, you can see a few of them. There's Mike Tyson's, there's all sorts of things, Tiger Woods, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of them. I mean, just not limited to him. But for you to have that belief in you, I would only want 15% of that, just 100. Just that level of belief to say there is absolutely nothing unrivaled me that can. I wonder if the fetus and the ovary, when they meet at some point, look at each other and go, do you think this is going to work?
And they're just like, nah.
Nah, surely this is impossible. But I don't think so. They already know it. So it's a purposeful existence of consistently relearning to love yourself. And that's how you get the intentionality, and that's how you find that trajectory.
Okay. So can I do a little bit of a diversion, slight diversion, but it's still the same topic, obviously, given to the people what we promised. Here's a scenario. You go onto Twitter. It doesn't matter what the subject matter of the initial story is, but the hashtag that's prominent is men are trash.
You just had to get the men are trash thing in. Hey,
I want to know what your opinion is, because this is a very I want to say generation.
I have a very strong opinion.
it goes against self-love.
So here's the thing though, because it's not men calling each other trash. So
But a lot of men are calling themselves trash.
They're behaving as though they believe that they're trash. But the reason why I want to bring this thing up is because when you bring up the topic of men are trash, I feel like it's alluding to this internal or this kind of cold war happening, like intergender, between men and women. And
look, I can't even begin to appreciate the sensitivities of the challenges women have had. I can probably equate it to the race battle that's gone on as blacks and whites. That's about as close as I can. But the challenge with that is that it's not the same, because they have the race battle too. And piled on top of that, they've got a gender battle, right? So I can't begin to imagine the level of, to use a very loose word, because I don't think it even describes it, pain that on top of everything else adds. So I can understand the usage of language that creates an expression that voices their trying to get the point across that, listen, how else can I put this?
Something needs to change.
Right? Because, we've we've tried it in a loving, commercial, communicative way, and it's just not changing. So this is about as ferocious as I can get in terms of expressing to you just what this is meaning to me. I get it. I get that in its entirety. I think what we need to try and do consistently in whatever it is that we need to try and do is to say, what are we trying to do? What is the objective here? There is an objective to put people on one side and bash them, yes, because in more cases than one. As I said earlier, it's actually deserved and in some cases understandable. But will it move the needle? No. Won't move the needle. I remember Saint Teresa, saying that she never goes to march in anything that's against something. She goes to march for things that are for something, because she doesn't believe that things that are, the more you march against something, it's this pretext of the law of attraction. That's all you're going to get. the more it's going to mount up. But if I march for something, if I march for love, if I march for caring, if I march for compassion, if I march for that, then marching anti this and anti that, then that was her sense of, and I believe that. I don't believe that things that are anti create the kind of trajectory motion that give the lasting outcome. And that's my sense of my view on if it's meant to express what it is that you truly feel because of the challenges, I hear you. If it's meant to change the dynamics of what's going on, ain't gonna do it.
Because like, at what point is it a matter of, because when you say men are trash, you know, the best way that I can put it in a positive light, that phrase, that movement, that allusion to the movement is, you know, you are trying to fight for women, but more times than less, when you hear the phrase men are trash, it's not even a matter of now women fighting for women, but women fighting against men. You know.
So anything along those lines. The moment you are anti, the moment you're this, you're actually against that very thing, which is not going to give you the outcome that you're looking for. Because whether we like it or not, the progression forward in anything is always by mutual and as much as possible. By some kind of consensus, or otherwise the other solution is let's shoot each other and whoever's standing carries on, right? So
it doesn't really work that way in terms of men and female.
So if we are all going to be on here, we need to figure out, you know, what is the way forward and how do we do it? And this is not just a gender issue; it's a race issue, and it's also in the context of this conversation, even within men. We don't have to sit down and say, guys, you know, this, no more. That we're not tolerating anymore. You know, and it's going to have to be as significant and as impactful as getting up tomorrow morning and saying everybody's going to wear a mask. That's how we're going to deal with this. Now, you can be some other parts of the world where you are going to argue about whether that's right or wrong, okay? But in places where we've all agreed that's how it's going to be. And that's what we need to start doing when dealing with the men issues and the gender issues. We need to get up. So bit by bit, I saw the other day, there's, equal pay in some sporting arenas. And that's not, as men, we need to say, guys, it is totally unacceptable that women who are doing exactly the same thing you're doing, with the same intelligence that you have, if not more than you, are getting paid less. Simple. That's it. That's not a... And by the way, it's men who are in positions of power and authority who are actually not saying that. I mean, if you're in leadership, you should get up tomorrow morning and make that announcement. You should create a policy that states it, that it's discriminatory, that anyone in any organization who's doing exactly the same job, that's an overnight thing. That's not a... Let's
legislation
trickle this across the process. So I think it's imperative that as men, we start creating those kind of decision-making processes that bring the positivity that need to be. But my view is that as long as if it's about venting, if it's about expression, if it's about, we're just going to have to take it on the chin because we are men. We have been trash, right? We're just going to have to take it on the chin. But if it's about moving the needle forward, that's not the needle. That's not how the needle is going to move. It's not going to move at all in that perspective. So we're just going to have to figure out how to move that needle forward.
Okay. There's so
very
many
quick things
questions
that we can do tomorrow. Yeah, no.
So many questions that I have to ask. I mean, things going along the lines of, like, we're talking about self-love in men. I feel like something that gets in the way of self-love is masculinity, toxic masculinity. I mean, as men, we don't love each other a lot of the time. And I feel like if we did love each other more, we would be able to teach each other self-love. But these are like...
You can't love if you don't love yourself.
Yeah.
You can't give love if you are not love.
Yeah.
And by not love, I don't mean that you're not born as love. I mean, if you haven't...
Don't acknowledge it.
Lit that fuse that says, I'm love. I love myself. And it's a consequence of loving myself and being love that enables me to see you as I see you and you as I see you. If I'm not doing that, I mean, T.D. Jakes has always said that, you know, in all his counseling that he's ever done over the last 40 or so years, that he's never met somebody who was violent who loved themselves. The two are an oxymoron. So whenever you see people who are behaving in manners that just don't tie into what we would call sort of universal accepted principles and norms, like let's try not steal from the poor, let's try not, attack defenseless children, etc., you must know that behind that person, there's no sense of love for themselves and who they are. Because anyone who loved themselves wouldn't want to see themselves in a position where they could look at themselves and say, this is what I do.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Uncle Vic.
Cool.
So Uncle Vic does a bunch of courses called Value Men.
Value add, yeah. So
Value add.
Yeah, which value? Well, Value Men is something that we're going to be starting pretty soon. Or Men of Value.
Men of Value.
Okay.
So same thing along the lines of what you guys are doing, which is really cool.
That's
I think
awesome.
we're going to need the details for that, if you don't mind, that we can just share it with our viewers.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. And what I'd like to do is, and what we've also done with celebrating women and Women's Month, is that we had Women's Month events last month. I think we had 3 in August, and we've decided that we can't just be celebrating women and talking about women having a voice, whether it's in the workplace or wherever actually. Once a month in August.
That's what you said.
Right. So we're running those series monthly. The Men of Value, we're going to be running them every month, and where we're having conversations live over Zoom, etc. And then every second month we're going to bring everybody together and have a look at the subject matter and the topic. But we are hopefully going to get people who are of some ilk that are able to then make calls tomorrow. And by calls, I mean they're just some things that just don't need a whole another 5 years conversation about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need action.
We just need things to be done. So
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
So yeah, if you want to get more of this wisdom and this knowledge from Uncle Vic, please head through to valueaid.co.za and sign up for one of the courses. Or if you agree with what's been spoken about and you feel like you agree with the need that is out there for men to learn to love themselves, Uncle Vic is definitely someone who's planting those seeds in people.
Yeah.
So you can also go to his website and sponsor someone to be a part of that course as well.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Thank you so much, Uncle Vic.
Thanks very much. Thank you, guys. Excellent stuff. I really enjoyed this. This was cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's
We
not
need
every
to do
day I'm
another one.
on this end of this podcast.
We need to do another one though. I've got more questions and I'm unsatisfied.
Yeah.
Dissatisfied on my side.
Yeah, but all of
yeah.
the information that Josh just briefly mentioned will eventually be in the professional help tab on the Discord, to people that are currently listening and to the people watching in.
So join the Discord if you want that information. Yes. And if you also want to be a part of the conversation. I see we've got one listener, Wager360. Thank you so much for coming through. You're a plug. Anyways, so I think we're going to wrap it up now, because I understand Uncle Vic's got a meeting, an international meeting even.
Yeah. Talk to fellow African diaspora. So yeah.
There you go.
Awesome. Yeah, we can have another conversation about Pan-Africanism.
Let's wrap it up like Kauai then.
Thanks. No,
But
good one.
yeah, thank you so much. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Don't forget to follow us on our socials, The Bridging Podcast. That's that.
Cool.